remote desert plain in the Peruvian Andes may hold the key to an ancient puzzle. On January 5th, 1973, we reported the possibility that the lines and figures etched on the mysterious plain marked the site of a landing made by astronauts thousands of years ago. Since then, the strange drawings, visible only from the air, have been photographed by aerial survey, satellite, and the Skylab astronauts. The lines at Nazca, when added to the evidence of other sites around the world, indicates that the Earth may not merely have been visited by ancient astronauts. It may, in fact, have been colonized by them. There are marks that have been left by past civilizations to indicate the presence on Earth of explorers who came across the divide of space. Did those colonists inspire the legends of gods who came from the skies? Can we find the historic fact of their presence in the myths of ancient man? 100 years ago, an amateur archaeologist decided that Homer's Iliad was not myth, but history. He followed the epic account through the Aegean Sea to Asia Minor, and there he found the ruins of the lost city of Troy. What other legendary places contain evidence that converts myth to history, that supports tales of events so far beyond the range of normal human experience they have for centuries been dismissed as allegory and legend? In the last 50 years, science has developed tools to date past events and probe ancient mysteries. So we are finding that old accounts take on new meaning.
If we look for evidence that the Earth has had visitors from outer space, the best book at this time we can use is the Bible once again. In the Bible, the Old Testament, the book of the prophet Ezekiel, gives us a very detailed account of a visit, actually of several visits, of extraterrestrial beings to this Earth.
It's possible that in the course of our history and in the last 13,000 years that ships from Epsilon Botis have come here, have conducted survey missions, possibly even had small settlements established here for a time and pulled out again.
As we left our tracks on the moon, so too must the ancient astronauts have set theirs on the Earth. If so, where is the evidence of their presence? Where are the artifacts they have left behind? Perhaps the clues are not all buried in the past.
Gemini 7 here, Houston on your 8.
Loud and clear. 7, go ahead.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high.
This is Houston. Say again, 7.
I said we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Roger.
Gemini Control here again. The reference in that conversation was bogey. It was Borman who reported sighting the bogey. This is Gemini Control Houston at 4 hours, 24 minutes into the flight.
Bogey is the code word for an unidentified aircraft. But a bogey in space is almost beyond belief. Or is it?
The following program speculates on what might have happened. It is based on established facts, but it is not a news report.
The sun in our heavens will burn for another 4 billion years. Then it will expand to a red giant. It has happened elsewhere. Many suns in the universe have died. Somewhere in space, an advanced civilization may have seen the end approaching and begun the search for a new planet that could sustain life. We have come of age in space. Our own explorations tell us it is possible that man-like creatures might have come here in their quest for a place to regenerate life. If they had come from an Earth-like planet, this Earth would have been an ideal new home. And here they might have landed, in the mysterious Peruvian Andes, near a lake called Titicaca. From the shore, the outline of Titicaca has no pattern. Only when viewed from space does it take on the shape of a jaguar about to pounce. In the ancient language of the region, Titicaca means Stone of the Jaguar. Was it named by arriving space colonists? An arid mesa called the Altiplano fringes Lake Titicaca. On the barren, windswept plain, the air is thin, and corn does not grow. It is a harsh environment. Yet there is reason to believe that here, long ago, a colony was established by visitors from another planet. It is possible that the first inhabitants of the Altiplano are our dim and distant ancestors. We may never know what actually occurred here. Most of the traces have been obliterated. The Inca, who dominated this part of the world, erased the histories of the regions they conquered. But in the mounds, rubble, and broken walls of an Andean plain lie the ruins of a once great city. Called Tiahuanaco, it stands mysterious and unexpected at 13,000 feet above sea level. It might have housed the most advanced civilization of ancient times. Long before the Inca arrival, Tiahuanaco was a reality, and the question arises, how much did the Inca take away in plunder, and how much in technology? The Inca did not build Tiahuanaco, nor did the ancestors of Indians who now live on this desolate mountain plain. Who did create this city? Estimates of its age range from 1,200 to 15,000 years old. Could Tiahuanaco have been built by colonists possessed of a technology far more advanced than that of man? This subterranean temple is not unlike an anthropological museum or the trophy room of some big game hunter. The faces show a bewildering variety of shapes and expressions. Some are familiar, others alien, a range that covers the racial spectrum of man. Are these models of man or experimental designs for man? Grim helmeted carvings found in South America seem to trace their inspiration from the Tiahuanaco monolith. In 1927, the carvings were interpreted as an account of the Earth's original capture of the moon. The theory was dismissed as nonsense, but after 7 Apollo flights, there has emerged a similar theory that the moon has wandered into our solar system, only to be captured by the Earth. Of all the mysteries at Tiahuanaco, none loom quite as large as a monolithic archway called the Gate of the Sun. Cut from a single block of andesite, it weighs at least 10 tons. Beyond the twin questions of how it got here and how it was cut by people who did not possess metal tools, is the mystery of the strange creatures that run across its face. For the carefully chiseled lines depict birds that never flew in the skies above the Earth. The most arresting features are the eyes, which are composed of still another creature, figures barely discernible, but nonetheless familiar to us as space-helmeted astronauts. No less mysterious are the eyes of the god atop the arch. 2 tears are deeply etched into his cheeks, and no one can say why the sun god of Tiahuanaco weeps. So it stands, a brooding, mysterious ruin, atop a desolate mountain plateau 13,000 feet in the air. Was it built by those who came to make a new home of planet Earth? "300 miles away, on another plane, lie the strange lines of Nazca. Nazca may have been a landing field, a base camp from which ancient astronauts took off to explore the planet they had found. Perhaps, but the lines at Nazca, which take shape only when viewed from the air, might have another function, one directly related to space and suborbital travel. For these lines, radiating in all directions, look not unlike the route maps of a modern-day airline. Do they point the way to other outposts on the Earth? A route map for the Earth's original colonists? If followed, where will they lead? One line pointing east leads to a remarkable, unexplained artifact, 300 miles away. No one can say when the great stone of Saiwiti was carved, nor do we know what tools were used, but here it stands. Various interpretations have called it a sacrificial altar, a city plan, a map of the universe, and a model of colonial outposts on Earth, complete even to the agricultural terraces that make farming possible in the mountains. The terraces in the Peruvian Andes, for example, have been in continuous use for centuries. They reach upwards to the ruins of an ancient city, complete with temple, astronomical observatory, and a fortress to guard the crops. Did the founding colonists design these mountain stepping stones for settling the planet? Sacsayhuaman is a megalithic fortress, presumably built by the Inca. The snake marks a stone so heavily magnetized, it will cause a compass needle to spin wildly. Legend says the Inca kings received a special power from this stone. With it, their empire spread from the Pacific coast to the Amazon jungle, leaving a record of accomplishment wrapped in enigma. The Inca knew nothing of the wheel, and yet their roads are still in use today. They had no alphabet, yet they developed an engineering technology that built structures such as this. Or did they? Were they creators or inheritors? Descendants or beneficiaries of a civilization and culture transplanted to the Andes from somewhere else? Sacsayhuaman is built of enormous blocks of stone, cut and beveled to fit together with micrometer accuracy. No one has even a clue as to how these blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, were quarried, shaped, transported, and set into place. 35 feet underwater and 1,000 yards off the northern shore of the island of Bimini in the Caribbean, there is another wall. There's absolutely no indication of who might have built it, but the huge blocks bear a striking resemblance to the masonry of the Incas. Some scientists claim it is a natural formation and not a wall at all. But if ocean currents cut the stones in the sea bottom, did they also cut them at right angles to each other? The Bimini Wall is but one of many mysteries in the Caribbean region known as the Bermuda Triangle. Here, ships and planes vanish under circumstances that defy all logical explanation. Just after the close of World War II in December 1945, 5 Navy fighter planes vanished without a trace, leaving a mystery that remains unanswered today. Their disappearance has been the subject of a 25-year investigation by magazine reporter Art Ford.
Well, a routine naval air patrol took off from the Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. 5 planes, 14 crew members, 5 different radios. After the planes were in the air a few hours, they vanished. 5 radios did not give a coherent reason why they vanished. The men were never seen again. No wreckage of the planes was ever found. There was no radio contact after they were lost. A search plane went up after them with 13 men aboard, with every bit of equipment necessary to find them. It vanished within 7 minutes. Particularly significant in the case of the missing planes was the radio transmission report that remains in the record in the archives in Washington. Lieutenant Robert F. Cox was flying out to try to find Flight 19. He said on the radio, "What is your present altitude? I will fly south to meet you." And Taylor, who commanded Flight 19, replied, "Don't come after me." He was warning his fellow flyers who were trying to rescue the plane, which they thought was lost, and he said, "They look like they're from outer space. Don't come after me."
More than 100 ships and airplanes have been lost in the Bermuda Triangle, taking with them 1,000 lives. There is no explanation for the disappearances that have taken place in clear weather and calm seas. But now we have one more question. Is this the corridor to outer space? Did the first colonists plant a homing device, a navigational aid, under these waters, a beacon for spacecraft to home in on, that somehow interferes with our own navigational devices? In the beginning, the Earth was a place of violent geologic change. Volcanoes thrust mountains upward. Islands were created and destroyed in the violent birth pangs of our world. In this same underwater volcanic cauldron, life may have had its beginnings. The principal basis of life is protein. The process by which life might have originated from inert chemicals is the subject of experiments by Dr. Sidney Fox at the Institute of Molecular Evolution at the University of Miami.
What's happening here is a splashing on a hot zone where the temperature is above the boiling point of water of a mixture of amino acids, water, and other volatile material. At this temperature, the water vaporizes, and the volatile material leaves, and the small amino acid molecules join together to form long protein-like molecules. These protein-like molecules, or as we call them, proteinoids, upon simple contact with water in the laboratory, produce what is a kind of minimal cell.
The product of Dr. Fox's experiments, cells born in the test tube. They challenge all traditional concepts of life on Earth.
In our view, the formation of primordial cells on the early Earth must have occurred many times, many places. If the conditions were right, we see no reason why this process could not occur elsewhere in the universe.
There are other theories that attempt to explain the origin of life. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old, but the universe in which it is placed is far older, perhaps 13 billion years old. Time enough for uncounted species to rise, create civilizations, and scatter them across the universe, reaching even a small out-of-the-way planet called Earth. Dr. Leslie Orgel is a biologist at the Salk Institute in California. He and Nobel Prize winner Sir Francis Crick developed the theory of directed panspermia, the idea that life on Earth was sent here by a superior civilization. Dr. Orgel.
In the 19th century, there were two theories about how life could have got to the Earth from outside. One theory, which was due to Lord Kelvin in England, said that life arrived as a spore carried on a meteorite. And the other theory, which was popularized by Arrhenius in Sweden, suggested that a spore could have been blown directly from a planet on another solar system all the way to the Earth. Now, in the last 10 or 20 years, it's become more and more clear that these theories just won't work, that a spore coming from outer space would be destroyed by radiation long before it got here, and a meteorite probably could never escape from another solar system. Now, directed panspermia is a sort of last attempt to resurrect the theory that life could have come here from elsewhere, and the notion is that maybe life was deliberately sent here by a technological society on some other planet, probably in our own galaxy. If life had arisen on the Earth and evolved spontaneously here, it seems at least possible that we would have many very different forms of life competing with each other. In fact, we know that all living things have evolved from a single cell which inhabited the Earth about 3 or 4 billion years ago, and there don't seem to be any traces of any competitors of that sort of a cell. Now, there are perfectly normal biological explanations of this that don't call for anything magical or anything extraterrestrial, but even when all is said and done, it remains a little bit surprising that there isn't any evidence for other sorts of organisms than the ones we see.
If a rocket had crossed the reaches of open space and brought to Earth the seeds of life, then it is possible that the seed of man also traveled here, directed by intelligence from another planet. Did the primitive Peruvians also know of these origins? If they did, it would explain why they carved fertility symbols from only one material, meteorites. For thousands of years, Neanderthal was the most advanced primate on Earth and a logical ancestor of man. But Neanderthal suddenly disappeared 35,000 years ago, and a new presence appeared on Earth, Cro-Magnon. So different is he from Neanderthal, most scientists cannot account for his presence. They know only that suddenly these creatures began to walk the Earth. We are their descendants. But the question remains, are they descended from the stars? Or did they receive from some ancient astronauts the knowledge and tools that enabled man to rise above the other creatures struggling for survival on Earth? Do ancient drawings commemorate such an event? Furrows in the California desert are merely scratches when seen from ground level. But from the air, they take on astonishing shapes. They were formed by men who lived here thousands of years ago. Men who could not possibly have sculpted these images without some direction from an observer high in the sky. All over the world, men have cut, shaped, and gouged the Earth to create images that could only be seen from the heavens. Thousands of years ago, someone carved remarkable earth drawings on the English hillsides. Were they placed there in tribute to some distant forebearer who came from space? Is that why man first turned his eyes upward toward the gods in search of his primal beginnings, and in the process began to question and learn of the gigantic forces at work in the universe? Is that how man's first science, astronomy, came into being? In the ancient world, there were no more accomplished astronomers than the Babylonians. Their cuneiform tablets mark the phases of Venus, the 4 moons of Jupiter, and the satellites of Saturn. None of these bodies or events can be seen without a telescope, a device invented 3,000 years after the tablets were carved. In the shadow of the Acropolis stands a 2,000-year-old observatory called the Tower of the Winds. Among the best preserved of all classical Greek buildings, the tower had frustrated archaeologists for years with the mystery of what it once had held. An early Greek text spoke of an astronomical clock mounted inside the tower. But how did it work? What did it look like? No one could say until a Greek sponge diver found these clockwork gears in the sea. Scientists estimated the gears had been built about 80 BC. Moreover, they determined that these plates and dials had been part of an extremely complex piece of machinery that had in fact been mounted in the Tower of the Winds. Finally, they concluded that it was an astronomical computer used to calculate the motions of the stars and planets. A stone circle crowned Sacsayhuaman. It may have been an astronomical calendar. No one knows precisely how it was used, but alternately, sun and shadow fill the boxes that compose its rings. The Inca called this the hitching post of the sun. With it, they marked the seasons, but it also had a religious purpose. It served to tie the Inca directly with the stars from which they claimed descent. And perhaps their claim was also made for all mankind. To some scholars, the world's oldest source of wisdom is in India. This chant is part of a spoken encyclopedia called the Veda. It is at least 5,000 years old and may represent the oldest body of technical knowledge known to man, with references to television, atomic energy, and interplanetary travel. Committed to paper 400 years ago, it is still the target of intensive research by scholars such as Padmasri Sivaramamurthy, the director of the National Museum of India.
In ancient India, as all over the world, they had a desire to travel in the sky. We have the aerial car of the god of light Surya mentioned in the Rig Veda itself. We have also the Pushpaka Vimana, a wonderful aeroplane that could carry any number mentioned in the Ramayana. A real aerial car managed by an engine. The rishis could transport themselves to any planet that they wanted because of their siddhi.
A force known as Sidli was said to exist in the world of the ancients. Using Sidli, they could transport themselves anywhere on Earth, into the skies, and finally to other planets. What was Sidli, and who brought it to Earth? If the tales and images of space travel were limited to India, they could be dismissed as the product of overworked imaginations. But how then could we account for primitive drawings in the rocks of Indio County, California? In the 20th century, we accept the existence of spacecraft. What event could possibly have inspired this 14,000-year-old drawing of a spaceship landing on the Earth? On a rocky plain in the Andes called Toro Muerto, hundreds of petroglyphs depict the same scene. Are ancient figures with spacesuit-like costumes the record of beings actually encountered? And where did the Indians of Colombia find models for these golden helmeted figures sculpted more than 1,000 years ago? The same people molded these golden objects, which look startlingly like a modern delta-wing jet fighter plane. Could flight have played a role in the construction of this rocky fortress in Peru? Called Ollantaytambo, it spans a pass through the mountains that link the jungle with the sea. The Inca builders were accomplished stonemasons who built a chain of fortresses across the Andes. Nowhere is there an explanation for the technology used to carry enormous pink slabs, each one more than 60 tons, from this mountain where they were quarried, across the river and valley, and then 10,000 feet up the face of Ollantaytambo. Could it be explained by a force known in ancient India as Sidley? Cuzco, once the capital of the Inca Empire, is a mixture of Spanish and Inca architecture. The walls of this street contain a stone that has 12 angles cut within it. So tightly do the stones fit that no mortar was ever used to join them together, and not even a knife blade can be slipped between the joints. The wall once formed a part of an Inca temple of the sun. The Spanish conquistadors used the walls built by the Inca as the foundation of a church. In 1950, an earthquake shattered Cuzco, virtually destroying the church. Today, the people of Cuzco are still rebuilding the church atop the ancient earthquake-proof structure. The original walls, however, remain standing. Again, the question arises, did the Inca receive this building technology from the original colonists? The strangely knotted strings are called quipu. No one today can read them. But when the Spaniards first came to Peru, the Inca kings would call upon their rememberers who would consult the quipu and account for every kernel of corn and man, woman, and child in the empire. But the quipu were more than a numerical accounting system, for with it an accomplished rememberer could call forth epic poems, historic dates, and events. The nuts show how the decimal system was used in the quipu, but added to them were colored threads that offered subtle nuances and shades of meaning that are forever lost to us. So sophisticated was the quipu, however, that some investigators believe it was the Inca version of a computer punch card. An enormous crystal was placed in a Mochica grave more than 1,500 years ago. It is among the hardest of all minerals, yet it was cut, polished, and shaped by a technology that theoretically could not have existed at that time. Other hands carved this skull. The British Museum calls it 15th century Aztec. But why would the Aztecs, who never created naturalistic art, suddenly render in crystal a skull? The bead is turquoise, another extremely hard gemstone. It is 1,700 years old and was probably part of a necklace or bracelet. The hole in each bead has a diameter of 0.19 millimeters. Even today, we can barely drill holes that small. The ibis is native to Egypt, but it was carved into an ancient stone printing roller found on the Pacific coast of South America, 8,000 miles from Egypt. These 1,500-year-old pottery figures form a portrait collection that depicts the races of man. All are separated by time and distance, and yet somehow the potters of an Indian tribe called the Mochica cataloged races they theoretically should never have encountered. An iron pillar was forged 1,700 years ago in India. It confounds the laws of metallurgy. Too large to have been forged in one piece so long ago, it is rust-free after 1,700 years. No less remarkable, although a mere 700 years old, is a rust-free iron tooth. Found in a Peruvian grave, it seemingly is as functional as any modern dental prosthesis. Other graves yield the suggestion that the ancient Peruvians were accomplished neurosurgeons. At the Cuzco Archaeological Museum, Dr. Fernando Caballesi, professor of neurosurgery at the University of San Marcos, demonstrates.
These skulls here are a
just a very small sample of the tremendous amount of skulls that were found in the graves of the ancient Peruvians. I think that all in all, we have studied more than 10,000 skulls that have been unearthed. Now, these are some of the instruments that they used. This is called the tumi knife, which was used this way just to open the scalp. This cannot be used in the bone. They used, to open the bone, they used other bronze instruments like this, just to pry up the bone, like here, prying up the bone. There are some other odd instruments like this, just to make these indentations. And there are at least 24 different other instruments that were used also. This one here is a very interesting specimen. It shows a very persistent surgeon. You find here that this man suffered 4 operations, and he survived every one of them. Either it was a very sick man or a very persistent individual who operated on them. But he was a very good technician, because after all, these areas, especially these 2 openings, are right over very, very dangerous sites that even right now, with all the techniques that we use now, we would just be very much afraid of operating in these sites. And this man really survived these operations. In Calca, near here, near Cusco, where about, I would say, 85% of these skulls show healed trephanations. 85% of survivals from skull operations is a pretty good and excellent result.
At the Yerkes Regional Primate Center, scientists implant monkeys with electrodes. The experiment stimulates the brain with radio waves and thereby controls behavior. Are today's scientists seeking knowledge already gained by similar experiments performed centuries ago? In 1947, a Bedouin boy found the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran. At least 2,200 years old, they bring us closer to the original Bible than any other source, and contain clear references to holy ones descending from the heavens. While biblical scholars study the scrolls for their theological implications, other scientists have looked to the Bible for evidence of extraterrestrial visits to the Earth. An aerospace engineer at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, Joseph Blumrich, has found in the visions of Ezekiel a technical description of a spaceship.
The prophet Ezekiel describes 4 encounters with spaceships. At first he saw clouds, fire, and he heard noise coming out from the sky, out of the north. And as the vehicle approached, apparently it came rather quite in his direction, he observed what he calls living creatures. What Ezekiel calls the living creatures had straight legs and round feet, or calf's feet, sometimes they're called. And it was the description of these landing legs that made me take the book of Ezekiel serious from an engineering point of view. I have had the opportunity about 10 years ago to work with my group in my office for the development of such a landing gear for an unmanned lunar landing station. For that hypothetical vehicle, we developed the landing gear and what we call the footpad, and what Ezekiel would call the round feet.
Translating Ezekiel into engineering terms, Mr. Blumrich had these artist sketches made of a landing vehicle supported by 4 helicopter units.
One of the interesting examples of Ezekiel's ability to observe and to describe are the faces he sees on these living creatures. He sees 4 of them, an oxen, an eagle, a man, and so on. They are located at the top of these helicopter units, and consequently they contribute to his impression of having some living creatures in front of him. What they actually are is quite interesting. Now, some helicopters, and particularly in this case this one, needs protection, just some hood around to protect them against dust or weather and so on. And such sheet metal structures will have cutouts, will have humps in order to accommodate levels or rods which are below them. And they do have they may have the distinct appearance of faces. We have a number of such face-like structures, like for instance the Gemini capsule. Then we have very interesting feature that looks like a monster, and every one of the audience will remember to have seen faces in rocks, in old trees and tree stumps.
Jericho was built more than 9,000 years ago. Here man has lived continuously for a longer period of time than anywhere else on the face of the earth. And here remains one of the most puzzling of ancient mysteries. Great walls 12 feet thick made the city impregnable. But Joshua called upon his priests to blow their trumpets, and the walls came tumbling down. But how? One theory holds that an earthquake tumbled the walls of Jericho, an earthquake that was part of an enormous planet-wide catastrophe. Around the world are indications of great disasters that might have caused the gods, themselves colonists on an alien planet, to flee impending doom. Did their departure inspire all the myths of Atlantis? Could there have been several colonies, blurred by time into the one Atlantis first reported by Plato? Are legends, in fact, the histories of visitors from afar who colonized the earth? Plato told of a fabulous kingdom that was then more than 9,000 years old. Whatever fragrant things there now are in the earth, or woods, or essences which distill from fruit and flower, grew and thrived in that land, wrote Plato. They constructed buildings about them and planted suitable trees. Some of their buildings were simple, but in others they put together different stones, varying the color to please the eye and to be a natural source of delight. They had such an amount of wealth as was never possessed by kings and potentates, and is not likely ever to be again. The entire area was densely crowded and kept up a multitudinous sound of human voices and din and clatter of all sorts, night and day. There were kings' baths, and there were separate baths for women, and to each of them they gave as much adornment as possible. There were many temples built and dedicated to the gods, also gardens and places of exercise. Over the centuries, the people of Atlantis apparently succumbed to the greed that seems eventually to afflict all civilizations. Their actions must have angered the gods, for Plato tells of Zeus calling them together to inflict punishment upon Atlantis. And when he had called them together, he spake as follows. And here Plato ends his tale in mid-sentence. But the people of Atlantis had been warned, and they fled the island in haste. Then Zeus must have spoken, for the island was shattered by what may have been the most powerful volcanic explosion ever known. Immense tidal waves and earthquakes followed the eruption. Scientists dated the catastrophe at approximately 1500 BC. This same chronology coincides with biblical and other accounts from all over the world that speak of or hint at incredible natural disasters. In Plato's time, this island was known as Thera. Today it is called Santorini. Was it also once the site of the fabled empire of Atlantis? We may never know, but the ruins of some ancient civilization are here, buried under a 250-foot layer of ash and pumice that covered the island 3,500 years ago. Was this the end of the beginning? The moment when all advanced forms of technology and culture vanished from Earth? Could their destruction be remembered now only as myths? Might such myths extend even beyond the Earth to incredibly dim memories of catastrophes suffered on other planets? Light years from our sun, in the constellation of Bootes, there is a red giant called Epsilon. It is circled by a planet that may once have supported life. Some scientists believe that a space probe was sent from that planet toward the Earth. They believe the probe received these signals in 1927. They were the first radio signals sent from Earth into space. These echoes have a different delay pattern. There is no natural explanation for the difference. Duncan Lunan, of the British Interplanetary Society, has interpreted the echo pattern as a message from the space probe, a message from a dying planet in Epsilon Bootes.
The star has become what we call a red giant. If we look at this painting here, it can illustrate the point. What has happened is that the star has exhausted its reserves of hydrogen in its core. In this situation, the inhabitants of the planetary system would find themselves in real danger. Their own planet would get hotter. In time, all the planets would get very hot. They would have, in other words, to perfect first interplanetary and then interstellar travel in order to get away from the sun. So the probe then came to the Earth. It came to the solar system. It located the Earth. It came into orbit around the Earth, and it began looking for signals, intelligence signals from Earth that would indicate the presence of intelligence. All the star maps, all the diagrams that I've interpreted as star maps, seem to confirm this indication that it was about 13,000 years ago that the probe got here, and it had finally been activated by our radio signals in the 1920s. Was it doing it because it was signaling home that it had been activated? If so, and if there's anyone there to hear it, perhaps in about another 150 years we could expect to hear something from these people. It's possible that in the course of our history in the last 13,000 years that ships from Epsilon Bootes have come here, have conducted survey missions, possibly even had small settlements established here for a time and pulled out again.
It is possible that visitors from Epsilon Bootes arrived 13,000 years ago. Perhaps a city in Peru, abandoned 3,000 years ago, was the base. It once held 100,000 people. Why did they flee? We will never know, for they left nothing of themselves, no trace of their presence, except a silent city of mud walls. Might they have been colonists recalled to base in the face of an impending catastrophe? What happened here, on this windy plain, halfway between the sea and the sky? The only witness is a mute stone god who looks out at the ruins of a once great civilization and weeps. It has been estimated there exist 50,000 civilizations more advanced than the one we know. If only one of those civilizations saw its sun dying, it could have seeded the Earth. Someday, somewhere in the galaxies, we may encounter life that is remarkably similar to ourselves, and we will be able to confirm that the faint traces of ancient mysteries are the imprints of our ancestors from space. Man has been in space since 1957, when the Russians first orbited a grapefruit-sized satellite called Sputnik. Since then, men have walked upon the moon and lived in laboratories that orbit the space between the Earth and the moon. Soon we shall reach out to the other planets of our solar system, and then to the stars. But even before men ever dreamed of space travel, they reported on visitors from space. And to this moment, the reports continue. Are the most recent UFO sightings evidence of continued alien interest in the Earth? Is someone in space still watching the descendants of a colony sent to Earth thousands of years ago?
Loch Ness, Scotland.
I told my friend, there is a Loch Ness Monster, and it was an absolutely huge, huge animal.
This huge black neck suddenly appeared, 7 or 8 feet, moving along quite slowly like this, with no humps visible, but quite clearly about 15 seconds before it went down.
Well, then, of course, when we told people about it, nobody believed us at the time. They said, oh, you've seen a water kelpie or something, and pulled our legs. They didn't believe it. But we knew we'd seen the thing. It was really terrifying.
The Himalayan mountain range, Asia.
I saw the abominable snowman on the western slope 100 yards away from me.
The Pacific Northwest, the United States.
I felt something staring at me, or a feeling of being watched. And I turned around, and that's when I saw Bigfoot. I was terrified.
Well, I was in shock. It's totally unexpected. And the only equation I could make on this thing is that it was a gorilla.
And we saw this hairy-looking animal crossing the road on his hind legs, and I can't tell you for sure what it was, but I believe it was Bigfoot.
Do monsters dwell among us, or are they only apparitions, walking in the landscape of our minds? Are they subjects for zoologists or psychologists?
Some people want to believe in the existence of monsters because they make the world more colorful and exciting. As children, we live in a fantasy world and create all sorts of imaginary beings. But as we mature, we're taught to be less credulous and to believe only in that which can be proven to exist. Most of us are able to give up our imaginary creatures, but some people can't. They create monsters that provide an outlet for their internal fears. By embodying these nameless fears in strange creatures, they externalize them and make them easier to deal with.
Man has always been quick to believe in monsters. They are beliefs born out of the unknown, nurtured by the unexplained, beliefs difficult to disprove. Some monsters, however, have had a basis in fact. For centuries, Western man had heard rumors about a legendary man-monster that roamed the jungles of darkest Africa. It wasn't until the late 19th century that science caught up with the legendary monster, calling it the gorilla. New biological species are being found each year, like the Komodo dragon in 1912 and the okapi about 1900. Yet some creatures remain myths.
Myths are a part of universal folklore as humans seek to explain a practice or a belief. The Smithsonian is concerned with studying truth and seeks to explain beliefs as well as preserve objects associated with them. Myths about strange creatures seem to hold a never-ending fascination for the public. Thousands of inquiries have been directed to the Smithsonian asking about the possible existence of various creatures, including the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and the abominable snowman.
In the last decade, over 300 reported sightings of Bigfoot have been recorded in America. In 1973 alone, there were 33 reported sightings. This year, 9. Called Momo in Missouri, the Fouke Monster in Arkansas, the skunk ape in Florida, Sasquatch in Canada. The giant monster is said to have migrated here across the Bering Straits land bridge that once connected Alaska to Asia. A relative of the Bigfoot has been reported seen in the Russian Caucasus, where it's called the Almista. Another relative is said to live in the Himalayas. Here in the highest mountains of the world, it is known as the abominable snowman, or the Yeti. In Kathmandu, Nepal, nearby famed Mount Everest, Sanskrit scholar Yogi Narahari Nath tells of his encounter with the creature.
I saw a Yeti while I was trekking with 60 other people in the western Himalayas. I was 100 yards ahead of my friends when I saw an ugly-looking black creature walking like a man. It was hairy and naked, and it moved fast.
The culture and religion of the mountain people of Tibet and Nepal, the Sherpas, are filled with tales and dances of demons. Some are of the abominable snowman, considered an evil spirit to be feared. Among some, it is considered fatal to even look upon a Yeti. Part of the mountain people's lives for centuries, the snowman only became known to the West in the late 19th century, when British mountaineers began to attempt to conquer Mount Everest. Cool-headed explorers returned with tales of the mysterious Yeti, tales of strange footprints left in the snow. But it wasn't until 1951 when veteran climber Eric Shipton discovered a new pass at 19,000 feet that actual evidence was collected. Shipton, standing where no man had ever been before, took these photographs of giant man-like tracks. Once a non-believer in the Yeti, Shipton, now in London recovering from a back ailment, remembers that day.
Strange feeling inside. I've often seen these tracks before, but hitherto I'd always been a bit of an agnostic about the whole question, but seeing these tracks so absolutely fresh and clear, well, there seemed to be no doubt about it at all, and it was that really gave me a very eerie feeling that here one was in the presence of something quite unknown.
What the footprints show are the tracks of an animal that moves on 2 feet for long distances. The only animal known to do this is man. Further, the footprints, larger than those of apes, show no claw marks normally associated with bears. Original evidence was collected in 1953. While directing the Hillary expedition, the first to reach the top of Everest, Lord John Hunt says he heard the Yeti.
This was during the 1953 expedition when we were doing some training, expedition training, in the mountains on the east of Everest, and I myself, with some of my companions and Sherpas, were camping beside a glacier behind a mountain called Armadablang. It was the Armadablang Glacier, and it was at about 18,000 feet. And one evening in that camp, I distinctly heard what seemed to me to be a yelping call or cry from the other side of the glacier. I wondered what it was, and the Sherpas with us were unanimous in saying this is a Yeti. I think the nearest equivalent sound is the sound made by an ape, which does have a yelping cry.
Almost never seen by Westerners, the Yeti was once reportedly glimpsed by N.A. Tambazi of Athens, Greece. It was during an expedition to Everest in 1925. Here, from his descriptions, is a recreation of what Tambazi said he saw in a clearing 300 yards away. A dark and hairy man-like creature grubbing for roots with a stick. Thought to be a missing link, a creature unchanged from the Ice Age, perhaps even an ancestor of Neanderthal man. The snowman became the object of extensive expeditions. Year after year, teams from England, France, America, and Japan combed the mountains for proof that the snowman did exist. Anthropologists and naturalists joined in the search, looking in vain for bones or a dead carcass, for something physical to bring home to a Western world of skeptics. Among the things they did find was this cave in 1958, said to be the lair of the Yeti. And in 1961, what was said to be the hide of a Yeti. And even its alleged mummified hand. And what was said to be the hide of a Yeti's scalp. These artifacts, plus eyewitness testimony, convinced many of the Himalayan travelers that the snowman did exist. The leader of one expedition, however, does not agree. Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to reach the top of Everest, led an expedition in 1960 to search for the snowman. After analyzing the mysterious footprints in the snow, he contends they were made by known animals. Footprints, he said, change shape, grow larger as they continuously melt and refreeze. He brought the alleged artifacts of the Yeti back to England for examination. The scalp turned out to be that of an antelope, the hide that of a bear.
I believe that many of the sightings, perhaps, came from people seeing this very rare animal, the Tibetan blue bear. One reason for saying this is that we obtained some skins of the blue bear, and on seeing them, the Sherpas would immediately say, Yeti, Yeti, because all the markings on the chest and on the creature fitted in with the stories they'd told us about what the Yeti looked like.
At the Smithsonian Institution, Secretary S. Dillon Ripley, ornithologist and a veteran traveler in the Himalayas, agrees.
I am convinced that it is possible in the mountains to have things elude one for generations. There are several birds that I'm still looking for and hope to find before I'm through. I'm also convinced that this kind of vast space, high up, does have an effect on people. The first trip I made in the Western Himalayas when I was 13 years old, I became entirely aware of the sensitivity of the Tibetans who lived there towards myth and legend and folk tale. It is quite possible as you go by a mountain where there is a narrow gulch and a stone comes rolling down soundlessly, just missing your head, barely avoiding you, as it were, it's quite possible to believe that someone, some evil genius, just rolled that stone down. If you project this kind of imaginatory thing, this episode where a real stone just misses you, at the altitude of 13, 14, 17, 18, 20,000 feet, whatever it may be, you can easily realize that it's a question of mental imagery and the possibility that you yourself can be deluded.
And yet, reports of the abominable snowman's possible existence continue to come in. In July 1974, a Sherpa girl, Lakpa Doma, claimed she was attacked by the snowman. In the last several years, however, a search for a similar creature has begun elsewhere, in America, where the giant is said to have migrated on what was once the Bering Straits land bridge. In the Dalles, Oregon, the first center has been opened to collect known data on the alleged monster, the American Yeti, known as Bigfoot.
What happened? Did you think you actually saw something or heard something? Okay, did it look like a man? Was it walking upright? Okay, how big do you think it was?
Before coming here, Peter Byrne of Ireland previously spent 16 years in the Himalayas, looking for the Asian counterpart of Bigfoot.
I decided to leave the Himalaya and come here and get into the Bigfoot investigation and search because I felt there was more chance of coming to a conclusion in this area, in this country. Here, there are many advantages that we didn't have in the Himalayan searches. There's a system of roads that enable you to get into the backcountry. There's communications, telephone, radio, and so on. We had none of these things in the high Himalaya. The terrain was extremely difficult. We could have gone on for years and years there, I think, whereas here, although it's been 3.5 years, I think we will come to a conclusion quite soon.
First found in Indian folklore, Bigfoot has become an American legend. Now, some hope to prove that legend a reality. Does a wild, giant, man-like monster called Bigfoot roam the American forests? Could a sizable population of 8-foot, 500-pound creatures exist on the edge of an industrialized society? American scientists emphatically say no.
I don't care what other people think. I saw Bigfoot 10 years ago. I was with 11 other Boy Scouts at the time. And we were camping 18 miles south of Butte in the Deer Lodge National Forest. We had walked in to the forest about 5 miles that day.
It's not over yet. We got another mile.
In this dramatic recreation is what Dan Malachny and 2 of his friends claim they saw. It was after a long day of hiking and a long night of telling mysterious tales around a campfire. For the more impressionable, sleep was long in coming and short in duration. Whatever it was in the forest, Dan's friend was the first to sense it. The first to hear it. Dan and one other boy claim they also saw the hairy, man-like giant. Some boys doubted their story, but Dan was certain.
It took us a couple hours to get back to sleep, and when we got up the next morning, we went up on the ridge where we saw the Bigfoot at,
And when we got up there, we discovered a number of footprints, the biggest footprints I've ever seen. And they look something like this.
Exhibit A, the footprints. By now, thousands of them, first observed, then preserved in plaster. Human-like footprints, some 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. The footprints of a giant.
Did they talk up? Yeah.
In the area where most of these footprints have been found, a privately funded expedition sponsored through the National Wildlife Federation hopes to photograph a live Bigfoot or produce evidence of a dead one. Under the direction of Robert Morgan of Miami, Florida, the group has already claimed discovery of additional footprints in Oregon and Washington. They believe a colony of over 200 Bigfoot creatures inhabit the unexplored wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. The expedition has tried to anticipate the creatures' movements, running the roads, keeping a watchful eye for any evidence of its passing. Thinking Bigfoot to be a nocturnal creature, they're prepared to penetrate the darkness of night with special light amplification viewing devices. Morgan, a former government computer specialist, began to pursue Bigfoot only after having seen one, he says, in 1957.
And all of a sudden, this thing went through the bushes. He didn't go around. He went, I mean, I could see the wake, you know, just plowed right through it, and he moved up at an angle away from me. I was on the edge of a canyon. And at a point, I estimate about 40 yards from me, it went into an opening, a clearing in the brambles. And what I saw was the most man-like looking gorilla, in my estimation, that I'd ever seen.
In their search for evidence, monster hunters must always be on guard against the hoaxer, like Ray Pickens of Chehalis, Washington. 7 times, beginning in 1971, Pickens has tracked the wilderness with bogus Bigfoot tracks. His purpose, not to fool the scientists, but to fool the monster hunters. He tells us why.
Well, we were sitting there having coffee at this Arden Cafe, and 2 gentlemen came in, and they was asking us about Bigfoot. We said, well, we didn't believe in it. And one gentleman says, well, you hicks around Arden probably wouldn't. And I turned to my friend, which his name is Harvey, and I says, Harvey, we're hicks. What are we going to do about it? And he says, yeah, what are we going to do about it? I says, we're going to show them who the hicks are. And then I went home and made boots. And by the time the next day was over, there was 700-800 people looking at the tracks from all over the country.
There are a number of footprints that I've seen that are faked, and this can be done. But on the other hand, there are a few that show some characteristics that I think could not have been faked. This is one such footprint. This cast, I've drawn in the approximate reconstructions of the bones. This is a crippled individual where a couple of bulges have extended out between adjacent bones on the outer edge of the foot. If this had been a human foot, these bulges would have been farther back, but they're shifted forward, making the heel longer and the front of the foot shorter. This is exactly what is required for a foot that's going to carry perhaps an 800-pound body. Now, I don't think any faker could have thought of it and figured this out and adjusted his footprint accordingly. A fake footprint is just simply an expanded, enlarged footprint or enlarged copy of a human foot.
Here, in actual footage taken of what is said to be a real Bigfoot, is a creature similar to Dr. Krantz's club-footed giant. Filmed by Ivan Marks in late 1969 in Bosburg, Washington, the film has been denounced as a fake by some monster hunters. Here is yet another film of an alleged Bigfoot, also taken by Marks in Alaska in 1973. Marks, a hunter and maker of nature films, insists on its authenticity. No matter what the Marks films indicate, the most compelling evidence for Bigfoot's possible existence remains that presented by eyewitnesses. Former Sheriff Oliver Potter.
Like I say, I'm born in the woods, the Cascade Mountains. I know the animals that are here. This was something different that I had never seen before. A large creature, about 7.5 to 8 foot tall. It was grayish black in color, and as it went away from me, I seen the backside of it, walking as a man would walk on its hind legs.
It moved more or less like a man, and it was about 6-7 feet tall and probably a blackish brown color, and I couldn't see its face because it was running away from me across the road, and I actually, her and I both saw it disappear into the brush. Like I say, I was born and raised around here, and bears just don't walk on these hind legs that long.
There were 4 of us in the car when when I was the first one to sight it. We pulled up on the freeway and pulled back for optimum viewing. Oh, I'd seen people from the same location and in about the same spot before. Humans up there. It probably was twice the size.
And it was a dark, dark brown, just swaying back and forth, sitting on a rock.
Could the people who say they've seen Bigfoot be seeing something else? A bear, perhaps? Or could the creature be only in their minds?
Eyewitness testimony in the case of Bigfoot, I don't think is very good because you can't test it. It's the credibility of the person, and these people, if they want to see something strange, they can imagine it.
Dr. Stewart is Director Emeritus of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. He demands more proof before he'll accept Bigfoot.
I do not believe in Bigfoot because no hard evidence has been presented. All the evidence so far is in the form of footprints and such reports, all of which constitute soft evidence. Hard evidence is like this skull here. If you have a skull of this so-called Bigfoot, you can tell what it is.
Fact or fiction, Bigfoot has become a fixture in the American landscape. At Willow Creek, California, which proclaims itself the gateway to Bigfoot country, the creature is celebrated each year with a 3-day festival. Bear, ape, man, monster, or myth, one thing is certain. Bigfoot is an #1 tourist attraction. But halfway around the world, another alleged monster has proven to be an even bigger tourist attraction.
Loch Ness is famous, of course, probably the most famous of the Highland Lochs for its monster. The Loch Ness Monster.
They all come here seeking an answer to the question, is there a Loch Ness Monster? Loch Ness is the largest freshwater lake in the British Isles, 24 miles long, about 1 mile wide. In some spots, 900 feet deep. Located in the north of Scotland, the lake is said to be home to a mysterious family of giant creatures.
We were standing on the jetty by the boathouse, just on the left there, and looking across to the bay, we saw a sudden tremendous turmoil in the waters. And without being able to see anything, what was causing it. And suddenly we noticed this huge black head moving along, 7 or 8 feet out of the water, very, very slowly. And then after about 15 seconds, it went down. But we never saw any humps. But it was very exciting while it lasted.
Serpents and monsters have long been reported seen in the world's watery depths. They are part of the mythology of the sea. These strange creatures emerge from the bored and terror-stricken minds of weary travelers. Unlike the sea serpents of the past, the mysterious creature seen in Loch Ness has allegedly been photographed. The first time in 1933 by Hugh Gray of London. Scientists could not agree as to what this was. Then in 1934, a vacationing London surgeon, Dr. Robert K. Wilson, took this photograph, said to be of the neck and head. That same year, the London Daily Mail printed this picture, describing it as a photograph of the monster's fin. Lachlan Stewart took this picture in 1951. The first to show what are said to be the mysterious humps that undulate on the creature's back. Then in 1955, Peter McNabb took a photograph showing a large object in relationship to the 64-foot tower of Urquhart Castle. In 1960, Peter O'Connor took this controversial photograph, which he claims is of a 50-foot creature. Over the years, the Loch Ness Monster has reportedly been seen mostly by the residents of the tiny villages on the loch side. The people who live here, fishermen and farmers, lead quiet, uneventful lives. Two natives discuss their sightings of the monster.
Oh, it certainly did. It was a rounded hump, something like an elephant's back, and the same sort of colour, a greyish colour. And it stayed quite still for at least 2 minutes.
Both men claim proof for what they saw, for at the time, neither was alone.
Well, this sighting of mine was also seen by the Oxford and Cambridge group who were up there to find out about the monster.
More or less.
There were about a dozen of them.
Well, it's very similar to mine because the entire holiday makers and the gondolier, and there must have been 120, all saw it.
The monster has been a part of the cultural tradition of northern Scotland since the year 565, when, it is written, St. Columba drove off the creature by invoking the Word of God. The Word of God is still invoked today. In 1972, the Reverend Donald Orman performed the rites of exorcism at Loch Ness.
I adjure thee, thou ancient serpent, by the judge of quick and dead, by him who made thee in the world, that thou cloak thyself no more in manifestations of prehistoric demons. Begone, thou hideous demon, unto thine appointed place, and return no more to plague the servants of Almighty God.
Not all residents around the loch perceive the monster as evil. The children at the Drumnadrochit grade school, who believe in the creature despite attempts to teach them otherwise, see it in a more affectionate way. They call it Nessie. Nessie, however, has been said at times to show a more sinister face, as when John Cobb, British speed champion, took his boat onto Loch Ness in 1952. Cobb was attempting to set a new world's record. Cobb was killed, his boat striking a mysterious turbulence, which some claim was caused by the monster. Among those who believe the theory that Cobb met his death because of the Loch Ness Monster is Tim Dinsdale, a former aeronautical engineer and now a full-time resident monster hunter. Dinsdale, who lives on the loch, in this boat, the Water Horse, has been watching the surface of the lake for 15 years. His vigil began in 1960, after he took what is claimed to be the most convincing film ever shot of the Loch Ness Monster. Using a 16mm spring-wind camera with a 135mm telephoto lens, Dinsdale filmed this moving object 1,300 yards away. They enlarged the film as shown here, subjecting it to intense scrutiny. Their conclusions: that the film is of an animate object, not a boat, that it is moving 10 miles per hour, and that it is 6 feet wide, 5 feet high. Dinsdale has interviewed almost every living eyewitness of the alleged monster. Here he describes what it might look like, based on these interviews.
Then you get this tremendous body. The forward limbs, I think, are rather smaller than the rear ones. These curious humps, of which I think there are two basically at the pelvic and the shoulder girdle, and this region in between seems to be able to change shape. People have seen the back changing shape. They've actually watched it. And then right up the back end, you have, I think, a tremendous swimming tail, like a crocodile's tail, which is used to propel the thing through the water.
Dinsdale, who is not a scientist, speculates that Loch Ness might be inhabited by plesiosaurs, animals believed extinct for hundreds of millions of years. The theory is that plesiosaurs entered Loch Ness before the last ice age, when the lake had an outlet to the sea. That an animal believed extinct can still exist is shown in these films. The coelacanth, a fish thought to be extinct for 60 million years, was rediscovered near South Africa in 1938. The coelacanth was hidden in the open ocean. Loch Ness is landlocked, confined. Yet the question remains, could these waters be home to prehistoric creatures? To finally determine what mysterious creatures, if any, live in these waters, the Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau was formed in 1962. Operating until last year, the Bureau attempted to bring a long-needed expertise in the search for the monster. For 11 summers, until they ran out of money, they trained eyes and cameras on strategic parts of the lake. Their major achievement, this film taken by a 17-year-old volunteer, Richard Rayner, in June 1967. British Air Force scrutiny of this film led to the conclusion that, like the earlier Tim Dinsdale footage, this was a picture of an animate object of some size. Director of the Investigation Bureau was Member of Parliament David James. He tells us what criteria the Bureau used in evaluating eyewitness testimony.
Well, if in doubt, we threw out. We never accepted any account within 15 minutes of a vessel passing either way, because you can get extraordinary wake effects rebounding off the shore and so on. So multiple humps within 15 minutes of a boat, we rejected out of hand. We were very reluctant to accept any sighting report by a single witness unless he happened to be someone who was experienced like a gamekeeper or a naval officer with binoculars. But using the most rigid criteria we could, we found that on an average there were about 20 sightings a year, which we couldn't ignore.
There wasn't a cloud in the sky when 5 or 6 humps appeared about 200 yards away. And when I saw them, the thoughts that entered my mind were this: there was nothing there when we passed. It's not any creature I know. It fits the descriptions of the Loch Ness Monster. It must be the Loch Ness Monster.
This animal appeared, long, tapering neck, small head, huge hump, which I reckon 30 feet long, about 3 to 4 feet high at apex. And I shut my eyes once, twice, 3 times to make quite sure I wasn't imagining seeing something. But no, it was there all right.
The loch is a mysterious place. Shadows and wakes create peculiar effects. There are those who say anyone can be coaxed into seeing a monster in these waters. But if the monster is only an optical illusion or an hallucination, how can one explain these photographs, taken by a former professional army man, Frank Searle of London? Searle runs his own one-man investigation unit at Loch Ness. He lives hermit-like at water's edge, with few comforts of modern living. He has been here now for 5 years. His goal, to get close-up pictures of the monster. He tells us why.
I figure it would be worth a lot of money. Just the use of the pictures by the media all over the world, I think, would fetch in something like about £200,000 over perhaps the first 6 months. After that, there would be lectures, personal appearances and so on, and royalties from the pictures.
Nicholas Witchell, law student and part-time monster hunter, in a new book published in London this summer, questions the authenticity of Searle's photographs.
I'm afraid there are people who are faking photographs on the loch at the moment. This is done by superimposing objects onto negatives and by placing objects in the water and then photographing them. And recently, these pictures have been getting a great deal of attention from the popular British press.
To get better pictures, the monster hunters took their cameras underwater in submarines for the first time in 1969. But the unusually peaty and murky darkness of the loch's waters closed off all possible visibility. The submarines were considered useless and were withdrawn. Better results have been achieved with sonar, sound waves which collect echoes off whatever object they bounce. The echoes are converted into electrical signals on shipboard graphic recorders. 3 times in 1969, 70, and 72, research teams acoustically exploring the depths of Loch Ness have had contact with large, moving, but not necessarily living objects. The director of one of these expeditions was a Boston patent lawyer, Robert Rhines, who returned to Loch Ness in June 1974 to undertake a more ambitious underwater project.
You lower this there and have this sink into the silt and so forth.
Rhines' plans call for the dropping of 2 waterproofed cameras into the loch. The cameras are connected to a powerful strobe light and sonar recorder, all operated by a computer. When an object larger than 30 feet passes through the sonar beam, the computer will activate the strobe light and cameras. Every 10 seconds, another picture will be taken until the object passes out of the sonar's range. The equipment in place, a professional diver gives his opinion of working in Loch Ness.
You're dead right. I don't intend to go back to Loch Ness again.
Was it frightening?
It was frightening.
What was frightening about it?
The eerie darkness.
The buoy marks the location of the Rhines camera gear, 100 feet below the surface. Developed by Dr. Harold Edgerton of MIT, who also developed Jacques Cousteau's underwater equipment, this gear represents the current best hope of determining the monster's existence. In 1972, the Rhines team recorded this large object on the sonar screen, at the same time as it took this picture of a fin said to be about 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. The fin, Rhines speculates, of the Loch Ness Monster. The Rhines fin bears a striking resemblance to the fins shown on the fossilized remains of plesiosaurs. Dr. Nicholas Houghton, a vertebrate paleontologist at the Smithsonian Institution, replies,
I think it's very unlikely that anything the size of a plesiosaur would be able to live in Loch Ness without our being aware of it long before now, or being able to live there, period. because there just isn't enough room for something that big. In thinking about a plesiosaur, you have to think in terms of a moderate-sized whale as far as the amount of room it needs and the amount of food it needs. I can't give you very precise figures, but just to get sort of a ballpark order of magnitude, I would say that a reproducing population of plesiosaurs, whatever that is, maybe 40 individuals, we don't really know, but it would require a stretch of sea, depending on productivity, ranging along coastal waters, say from Chesapeake Bay down to, at least down to South Carolina or Georgia, and maybe all the way down to Florida.
Tales about strange creatures are always tantalizing. In time, some may even prove to be true. To date, however, in the absence of hard evidence, the scientists at the Smithsonian Institution do not endorse the reality of such creatures as Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, or the Loch Ness Monster. Undoubtedly, there are undiscovered biological species on Earth, and possibly in outer space. The scientists whose task it is to probe the unknown will one day discover these species. They will continue to try to separate the myths from the realities, to help solve the mysteries of that part of the world still strange and unknown.